Moi guys! Today I would like to share with you some hacks that I learned during my art journey to save some money on art supplies. Without further ado, let's get started! First thing, the sets are not always convenient. I bought a lot of sets during my art journey, and I discovered that especially for color pencil, they are not always convenient. In fact, for example, I can find the single Caran d'Ache pencils for like €3.50, €3.90, while the 20 color pencil set can cost up until €70. So my suggestion is to do your math before buying set, especially because in the set you will find the colors that are already selected for you, and you will find that you are not going to use all the colors and you don't even need all the colors that are inside the set. So it is better to buy singles color that you actually really need for your works and build your own set from there. And this is what I'm doing. Course I received as a gift, and I also bought some big set like this Prismacolor 36 sets of color pencils, but also in here there are a lot of color that you can see are literally untouched because they are so similar between them. So you will discover that a lot of the color inside the set actually will not be used at all. For example, in this set you can see the Burn Ombre Clair and the Burn Foncé are so similar. Also the pinks color are so similar on paper, and many times just mixing up the color you can obtain actually some of the color that are in the selection. So my first suggestion is save your money, don't buy sets, but just try to build your set, your own set, buying singular color. And if you want to start, maybe start out with a little set. Especially speaking about color pencils, I don't see a lot the convenience to buy a set if we're speaking about money. And also if you buy the singular color, you will see that you will buy just the ones that you need and not unneeded ones, so you will for sure save money. Of course, if you have the possibility, you can start with a very small set and then build your set from there. Almost same thing for watercolor and gouache. In fact, in particular, if we are speaking about watercolor, I got this 48 set of Holbein watercolor, and actually also here I have so many colors that are so similar among them. For example, you can see here the pinks that are colors that I'm not usually use in my painting, and also the reds are very similar. If I have to choose a selection, probably I would choose some other color to put in. Sometimes inside the set I don't have the color that I need, and a way to save money is just to create the color myself. And here I will show you how I create a lilac, kind of light lilac that I need in my color selection. And instead of buying it, I decided to mix some color and obtain it, especially because I have that large set with a lot of color that I'm not using. Another way to save money is choose tubes instead of pans. I wanted to build my own palette actually, and this is very easy to do with tubes. You can find tubes of 5 milliliters like in this case, or tubes of 15 milliliters, and you will save tons of money if you buy tubes instead of half pans, because inside there is more quantity and you can fill half pans or full pans many times from a single tube. So I really suggest to buy tubes instead of pans, and fill them up is very easily, and I have a video on my channel that will show you how to do that if you are interested. Another suggestion to save money is to squeeze completely the tube when you put it in the empty pan to use up all the product that is contained in the tube. But remember, if some product dry out inside the tube, don't waste the tube actually, but try to cut on a side the tube, take off the dry product and put it in a pan. That is totally possible and let you to don't waste any product and use up your color up until the end. So it's another good way to save some money. And here I show you my own palette that I build starting from the tubes that I got in the set that I showed you before. And in this case I just bought an empty palette and fill up all the empty pans and put inside. So I have the color selection that I want, and every time that I almost finish a color I just fill it up, and that's it. Gouache, same speech about the set. Actually, I got this 24 set of gouache, and also here you can see that there are a lot of colors that are very similar, like this purple and bluish color, and I generally don't use a lot of purple, so it's quite a waste of space and money to buy also color that I don't use so often. And for that reason I really suggest you, instead of buying big set, to start out instead with a little set of primary color and then build up from them. Like there are many brands that do primary color set, like Daniel Smith, like Holbein, like Winsor & Newton. And they are cheaper, of course, than big sets, and then you can buy colors from others brand and or the same brand that you like and are more particular, and build up your collection from them, and for sure you will save lots of money than not buying a big set with many colors that you are not going to use. Another good way to save money is also, before buying colors, to just buy a color chart of color of the brand you're interested in. In this case I have this Daniel Smith watercolor chart, and actually it's very useful because it let me to try many colors in just one piece of paper and see if I like the hue of the color, if I like the consistency and the final finish of the color before invest my money. So I really recommend you to get color charts, and also remember that in many shops like Jackson Art Supply shop you can get not only color chart like in this case, but also paper actually test that you can test out before buying, before invest your money. And I think this is a very good way to learn what you really want to use and where you want to invest your money. Another way to save money is to invest in a kneadable eraser instead of a normal kind of eraser. There are some reasons to do that. The first reason is that the kneadable eraser don't make any dust when you erase, and that's just great. The second reason is that you can model your eraser and obtain also little pointy kind of eraser to erase little areas, while with the normal rectangular eraser you cannot actually do that, and it is cheaper than the normal erasers, so why don't you get one? About sharpener, another way to save a lot of money is just to buy the normal metal sharpener, the more original that you can find. This is a Faber-Castell one, and I really suggest to have one with two holes, two different diameters measures, so many of your color pencils or pencils can fit in that. They are super cheap and they works just fine, so try to avoid the very fancy kind of sharpener that you can find out there. They are expensive and many times they don't do their job properly and ruin even the tips of your expensive color pencil or pencils. Speaking of sharpener, I really want to point out this Muji sharpener that is quite cheap. I think I paid just €4.50 for that, and it does a wonderful job sharpening down my color pencils. Actually, it's one of the best sharpener that I ever tried, and I just discovered it very recently and I wanted to share it with you. Another way to save money is to don't use mono-use kind of brush pen or ballpoint pen. In fact, if you can choose, invest in the refillable one. In this case, for example, I will show you some refillable pen that I found in shops, and again, the Muji pens in particular, they are amazing ballpoint pen. You can find them in many colors and they are refillable. And the refill costs half of the price of the pen. So if you use a lot of pen, this is a good way to save a lot of money. Speaking about brush pen, a refillable brush pen that I really like is this Pentel brush pen, and you can find the refill in almost any art shops or online. They are quite common and they cost less than buy a new brush pen. So this is another very good investment, especially if you use a lot brush pen. And is also a very good eco-friendly kind of choice to waste less plastic in the environment. So it's a good way to save money and also do something good for our environment. So why don't choose them? If you are like me, many times I see many brush sets in the art shops and I buy them, but in the long run I regretted to do that because I saw that actually I just use always the same 4 brushes. In this case, one rectangular tip mid-size brush, one rectangular very little tip, one round mid-size brush, and one round pointy brush, very little for details. And the only one that I miss here is a medium big size mop brush that is very useful. With that you can cover big areas as well as very little details. But my point is that you don't need a lot of brushes to do your works, but just try to buy the one that you really use, and in my opinion they can be just downsized to just 5 brushes to do all your works. So my advice to save some money is just to invest in a few good brushes than big sets in which you will find a lot of brushes that you are not going to use. And many times in large set, if you don't invest a lot of money, you don't have very high quality. So my suggestion is just to avoid the cheap set. Another way to save a lot of money is to buy generic stationery things that you are using in your art in supermarket and grocery stores in the stationery area and not in art shops. In fact, the example is this masking tape that I paid €1.50 in a supermarket, but in the art shops the cost was around €3.50 and is actually exactly the same product to do exactly the same work. So my suggestion is just to avoid to buy generic stationery things in our shops. Avoid to do that because the price will be higher for sure. Another way to save a lot of money, speaking about pencils and color pencils, is to buy extender. In fact, with the extender you can use up almost all your pencils and color pencils and you waste very few product. And here I show you this little blender, how short it is, and I am still using it actually thanks to this amazing extender. In this case I got 2 Derwent extender and I got them online for a price of €11. They were quite expensive actually, but you can find sets of 6 extender online on Amazon for €6–7. Another way to save some money is just don't buy these artist porcelain palette for watercolor and gouache. They are very nice looking, but actually they usually are quite expensive, especially in the art supplies shop. They can cost from €7 up. Choose a second-hand shop instead and try to find a dish, like in this case a rectangular kind of dish that can do the job for you, exactly the same job but for less than 4 or 5 times the price. In fact, I paid this rectangular one that I'm using for gouache just €1.50. Showing this very dirty, actually porcelain palette helped me also to give you another advice to save money. Don't waste your dry gouache on the palette, because with just a very cheap spray you can actually activate the colors and use them up until the end. So it is very important to don't waste any color. And here I'm showing you also a palette that I'm using. Is a cheap plastic palette in which I put gouache color, and also if I don't finish them up, actually I close my palette and then keep them, because a good way to save money on gouache is to have a dry palette like in this case, or a wet palette. Personally, I don't use wet palettes because I am afraid of molds that can create in the color. They require a lot of attention and a lot of clean, so I prefer just to use a dry palette like in this case. So any color that still remain on the palette when I finish my painting, I just keep it there and then activate them again when I need it. And using Holbein gouache, I have to say that I have never have a problem to reactivate color. Another suggestion is to check in your country which brands are cheaper than other brands. For example, Winsor & Newton in Europe is quite cheap. Holbein is very cheap in Asian country, and this is why I got all my Holbein art supplies in Japan. And if we speak instead of Daniel Smith, it is cheaper in USA. So do your math also in this case and see where the colors are cheaper. Invest for a known professional color brand, even for a student grade kind of palette, because for sure you will have a good quality and use the color will not be frustrating. My advice is not to buy a very big set that you can find for a known brand or non-professional brand. You will be frustrating using them and eventually you will give up to paint with them. So prefer to invest in a very little set but from a known and good brand, even for student grade colors. Another advice is to check different shops, both online and physical shops, when you have to buy a new art supplies to see the different prices and offer. This is quite obvious, but actually many times we think that online we will find the best offers, but this is not always true. As I said, I had my Holbein colors in Japan because they cost 1/3 of the price that I can find actually in Europe. But also I saw that, for example, on Amazon they are more expensive than on Jackson Art Supply. So if I have to buy the Holbein from Finland, I will choose for sure Jackson Art and not Amazon. Another example in my case is Caran d'Ache color pencils. They are very expensive on Amazon, for example, and they are also more expensive on Jackson Art online shop than in the physical shop that I found here in Helsinki. So of course, if I need the singles Caran d'Ache pencils, I would prefer to go in the physical shop and save some money. So always do your research before buy new art supply. Another way to save some money is to don't buy like professional, like in this case I'm showing the Faber-Castell water jar, but just using normal glass kitchen jar that you can save and clean after eating food that are contained inside. That is a good way to save money. I got this in Japan because it was super cheap and on sale. Otherwise, I will keep going with my glass jar that I saved from olives. And that's it, guys. These were all my hacks to save some money. I really hope that these hacks were useful for you. Please let me know in a comment below if you have any suggestion on how to save money. I'm very curious, so we can try to help each other to save something along our art journey. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If so, please give us a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to don't miss any other content. See you next time. Moi moi!